my boat can swiftly float through the teeth of wind and weather, and I'll sail the fastest hooker between Galway and Kinsale, when the white rim of the ocean and the wild waves rush together. Oh, she rides in her pride like a seabird in a gale.
Just want to say thanks to everyone for coming along this evening, and for anyone who's watching at home on NPU TV. Delighted to have Richie Piggott, who's here with us this evening. Richie's subject is the 50th anniversary of a US tour by Irish champion performers. So I'll let Richie introduce himself to you all, and we'll take any questions or comments at the end. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Emmett. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm a fan of Notes and Narratives for many, many years, looking at it online. So I can't believe I'm actually here giving one myself, but I hope I won't put you to sleep. I'll start with just a little introduction to myself, because I don't know how many of you know me, but I'm originally from Cove in County Cork. My father was from a little place called Dukes near Glenbeigh in County Kerry. He was an accordion player, mainly slides and polkas from that part of the country. And my mother was also a Kerry woman. She was from Dingle in County Kerry. She was a Flannery, and the Flannerys were all fishermen and also musicians. Her father and her brothers and all of her uncles were heavily involved in the marching bands of Dingle, so it was all fife and drum music. So I grew up in a house that was lots and lots of music. I'm not a musician myself, and I want to say that at the beginning, but I do love Irish music. I'm living in Chicago now for the last just over 20 years, 22 years. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I work in the food industry. I work for the Kerry Group in the food industry in North America. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I started a project. I was documenting, and continue to do it today, documenting the Irish immigrants who left Ireland and came to Chicago, the musicians. And that project has grown and grown, and it's now covering immigrants who came from probably around the mid-20s, mid-1920s, right up to the present day. And it's done through interviews. I've been interviewing a lot of the older musicians who are now well into their 80s and 90s. And those who have left, I've interviewed our families. And I'll come back to that project later on in the talk, because it has a bearing, obviously, on the topic we're covering tonight, which is the 50th anniversary of a tour in the US of Irish champion performers. And I'm not exactly sure, but I believe it was the first ever such tour to take place of musicians, dancers and singers from Ireland to the US, to a number of cities in the US. And it was organised by two people, one based here in Ireland and the other based in Chicago. The person based in Ireland was Sean Ryan, and the person in Chicago was Frank Thornton. And they met each other a few years before '69. Frank was over in Ireland on a holiday, and he met up with Sean Ryan. They played at a few sessions together and became friendly. And the following year, in 1968, Sean and Kathleen Ryan were actually touring a number of cities in the US with a very young Paddy O'Brien from Offaly. He was only, at that time, Paddy was only 17 or 18. And when they were in Chicago, they stayed with Frank Thornton and their family for almost a week. And it was during that time that they planned this tour of musicians, singers, and dancers. So just a little bit about the organisers, and Sean would probably be most well known to you. He was born in Nenagh. His musical influences from very early on were obviously his father. His father, Tommy Ryan, was a great fiddle player and accordion player. That's him up on the right-hand side there, playing for a dance. And also his uncle-in-law, Dinny O'Brien. Dinny O'Brien married Sean's aunt Ellen, and he was a big influence on Sean as he was developing his musical skills. So it was no surprise at all that Sean really became an excellent fiddle player. He won Fesciol or the Oireachtas, and he was a multi-Fleadh winner, a great fiddle player. And to add to his skills in playing, he was also a fantastic composer. He's composed somewhere between 250 and 300 tunes, and the family have published those in 2 books. And those tunes a lot of them are standard repertoire now of musicians all over the world. So he was a really good composer as well as a fiddle player. And he also had a Ceilidh band, which he formed in the early 60s. But before that, he played in this Ceilidh band. And I'm a bit selfishly showing you this photograph because in all of the photographs I have, this is one of my favorite photographs of any traditional musicians together. This is the Bridge Ceilidh band in 1958, and it was set up and led by Dinny O'Brien, Paddy O'Brien's father, or Eileen O'Brien's grandfather. The Bridge Ceilidh band was named, the so-called Bridge Ceilidh band, because Dinny O'Brien's house was right at the bridge in Newtown in County Tipperary, and it was known as the Bridge House. So when he formed the Ceilidh band, it was called the Bridge Ceilidh band. And in this particular photograph, they're just warming up. This is taken in Longford, and they're just warming up to participate in the Fleadh Cheoil in Longford in 1958. And that's Sean Ryan in the centre with a cigarette hanging out of his gob. It's just a great photograph. And to his right, or our left in the back against the wall playing the accordion, is Sean's brother, Tomás Ryan, or Mosh as the family knew him, who passed away only a couple of years ago. And the one person I believe who's alive today, well, I know he is alive, but I think he's the only one alive today, is the man on the far left playing the accordion. His name is Paddy Ryan, and he's alive today. He's 91. I had a good conversation with him only about a month ago, and he told me that they were just warming up before going in to participate in the Fleadh Cheoil. And I asked him, how did they get on in the Fleadh Cheoil? And he said, Jesus, it was the time when the Tulla and the Kilfenora were fighting each other, so we hadn't a hope. You know, so. But anyway, that's Sean Ryan. The other man is probably less known to you. His name is Frank Thornton. Frank was from the townland of Kilbaha, just outside my van. My van is in North Kerry, not too far from Listowel. He was a flute player, and he learned a lot from his uncle, Miles Thornton, who was a really good flute player, and he was also a champion step dancer in his time. Frank's next door neighbour was also a very good flute player, Tom Fury, so it was no surprise that Frank ended up playing the flute. In fact, I have an interview with Frank where he said that in 1929, when he left the area to go to Chicago, there were actually 32 flute players in the region, in a small little area. And his first trip back to Kilbaha from Chicago was in 1936, and there was only 2 remaining of the 32. All the rest were immigrated either to England or America, and that really broke his heart. So when he went back to Chicago in 1936, he started teaching Irish music. He said he was determined to keep the music going, so he cleared out his basement and set up a little school of Irish music for young kids. And at one stage he had 40 children he was teaching, and he was known to actually buy the instruments for some of the kids who couldn't afford the instruments at the time. And there's that picture down on the bottom is a photograph of some of his students. He formed a marching band. It was a tin whistle and drum band, and they used to play in Chicago for events like St. Patrick's Day or some concerts that they got together and played, or in Gaelic Park for some of the football games they'd march out before. So that's Frank. He was also a great organizer and very, very involved in the music scene in Chicago all of his life. He was a policeman. He joined the police force, and he was a policeman all his life. But he was very, very well known as a very good organizer. And in 1956, he probably did his best work in organizing what was colloquially known as the IMA, but it was the Irish Musicians Association of America. And he decided to call a meeting in Chicago in August of 1956. And he invited like-minded people like himself who were very interested in America, in the Irish music scene. And people like Louis Quinn from New York came to the event. Ed Reevy came from Philadelphia. Jimmy Giblin came from Cleveland. So it was a big gathering of Irish musicians from all over the major centers in America, into New York, or into Chicago for the weekend. They spent the whole weekend together, and the outcome of that meeting was the formation of what was known as the Irish Musicians Association. And then each of them went back to their various locations, like New York and Cleveland and Philadelphia and so on, and then they formed their own branches of what was the Irish Musicians Association. And it was a pretty active organization for probably, this was 56, probably towards the end of the 60s, and then they gradually started disbanding, and then a couple of years later Coltus came in, 71, 72, and started their formation in America. And the other thing he did organize, which was pretty novel at the time, and certainly novel still today I suppose, was he organized in 1959, so which is 10 years before this event that we're going to talk about. He organized a tour of American-born musicians back to Ireland. And it was June of 1959, the whole month of June. And this is the photograph and it was musicians, singers and dancers. And they were all American-born, but brilliant Irish musicians and dancers. And they played 23 concerts in 28 days. And I have the full program of where they went, but everywhere from, they started in Listowel, they went to Belfast, right throughout the whole country, Cavan, Dublin, all over. It was a fantastic tour. And as I say, this is the official photograph. Some of the musicians you might recognise. That's a very young Johnny McGreevy there with the bow tie, with the fiddle. And beside him with the box is a box player who was born in Chicago called John Lavelle. You might have heard of John Lavelle. He was very much influenced by Joe Cooley. John's parents were from Roscommon and Achill Island. And John used to go back to Achill Island every year. He passed away now, but I interviewed him in California a couple of years ago before he died. A lovely man. But anyway, that's Frank. He was a very, very strong organizer and deeply interested in Irish music and the perpetuation of Irish music in America. So they were the two organizers. Frank's role for the event was to select the venues for the concerts in America and to arrange the publicity, the local publicity and travel and accommodation and so on. And Sean Ryan's role, he was the director of the tour. His role over here was to put the performers together and also to finalize the actual concert program for the performers. So these are the performers, and this is the actual official photograph of the tour. So this was used in all of the promotion of the event. And you can read there behind on the back is Peadar O'Loughlin, Kilmaley, County Clare. There's Sean Ryan and Paddy O'Brien, his first cousin. That's Denny's son. And the tall gentleman on the right is Thomas Quinlivan. Thomas was from Kildare, a very, very good singer and piano player. And seated on the left is Kathleen Ryan, Sean's wife, who was the piano accompanist. Dennis Gilroy, who was a champion dancer. He won a number of Flack-Yule dancing competitions. And on the right is Eileen Begley. And of the group, there's only two of them alive today. Kathleen Ryan, who unfortunately is out of the country at the moment, And I'm delighted to say that Eileen Begley is sitting here beside me. So you're very welcome, Eileen. And last year I went to New York to interview Eileen about this event, and she was telling me that she had just given birth to the lady who's sitting beside her, literally a couple of months before that, and she was lying 6 weeks. Yeah, she was lying in bed, and who came into the bedroom but Sean Ryan and Paddy O'Brien and said, "You're going to come with us to America."
And I laughed at them and I said, "Oh," because I also had booked my ticket to Australia. I was going to. My husband had actually. No, he hadn't gone, but we were planning to go to Australia, and then I had the baby, and I said, "Tour America? I've just got a baby." I just laughed at them, and anyway.
I'm glad you did. I mean, I'm glad you went, not laughed at them. So this was these are the performers, and I should add that just before they left for America, Sean Ryan was contacted by Lauros O'Murricu. Lauros heard that the event was going to happen, and he called Sean and asked him could he go along with them, and Sean agreed if he would be the MC, for the concerts. So Lauros also attended the event. He travelled with them and attended and became the MC for the event. And this is the program that Sean created for so each of the concerts. This was the standard program. It was almost 3 hours long. It was a 20-minute intermission in between. And as you can see, I mean, I won't go through it all, but as you can see, there was a lot of when they played all the musicians together, it was called the Cayley Band. So when they got together to play a few tunes together, that was the Cayley Band. But then they also played solos, they played duets. There was a song in between, a dance in between, and you'll see comedy there as well. Thomas Quinlivan was supposed to be quite funny, and Lauros himself used to tell jokes or funny stories or whatever. So that was the actual program that Sean Ryan put together for the event. And here was the schedule. The first week was in Chicago, so they spent the first whole week in Chicago. It was November of 1969, so from the 15th to the 21st they spent in Chicago, and then they went on to two events in Ohio, in Cleveland and in Dayton, Ohio, Detroit, Michigan, Providence, Rhode Island, and then they finished up in New York before traveling back to Ireland. So that was the schedule. And so in terms of Chicago, they actually played 3 concerts. They were billed to do 2 originally, Bogan High School and Steinmetz High School. Bogan is in the south side, and Steinmetz is in the north side. Like all the big cities around the world, there's a south side and a north side, and it's the same in Chicago. But there was so much interest that they put on a 3rd concert in Siena High School, which is on the west side of Chicago. So over the week, they played 3 concerts in Chicago. And here's a photograph that was in the local press. It was also actually published here in the Independent at the time. Mayor Daley was the mayor of Chicago at the time, and here he is officially welcoming the touring group to Chicago. And you can see in the photograph there's Eileen on the left, there's Lauros shaking hands with him, Pedro O'Loughlin in the back, Sean Ryan in the back, Thomas Quinlivan here.
And Heather was really, really funny. We all used to say, grab hold of it, grab hold of it. When we saw him, grab hold of it.
Now, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning about the project I'm doing. And as I said to you, a lot of it is interviewing the immigrants who came over to Chicago, and just the history of their lives. And one of the subjects is this man here he just passed away in 2014. But he was originally from County Sligo, a lovely fiddle player called Phil Durkin. Not a lot of people heard about him, but he was a fine fiddle player who came to Chicago in 1950. And he was, when he was growing up in Ballincurry in County Sligo. He was living next door to John Vesey. John Vesey is a very well-known fiddle player who ended up in Philadelphia, spent the rest of his life in Philadelphia. And Vesey himself was taught by the great Michael Gorman. So Phil, as he was growing up, was taught by Vesey, and he became a very, very nice fiddle player. He immigrated to Chicago in 1950. He was a member of the Irish Musicians Association, which I mentioned earlier on. And he also had a long-standing, well over 25 years, Irish session in his house, in the basement of his house, every Thursday night. And all the musicians, you know, the Nearys and Johnny McGreevy and all the and Joe Shannon, they used to go down to his basement every Thursday night. So he was a very likeable character. He also was part of what was called the Chaffpool Cayley Band, which is here on the left. And the other musicians there are Albert Neary and Larry Nugent, you can see playing the flute. Frank Burke here playing the fiddle just behind the pianist. Frank was a lovely fiddle player who passed away only last year. And the two youngest are the Shine family, the Teresa Shine playing the fiddle, John Shine playing the piano. And both of those Shines were really good students of Phil Durkin, and they're great players now in Chicago. So they're continuing the Sligo music in Chicago from Phil. But the reason I'm mentioning him is that when he passed away, his sister, who's well into her 80s, Peg, called me about a month after and said, "We're selling the house and you need to come down because there's a lot of music here that you need to take or it'll be lost." So I went down to her house, or his house. Peg was actually living next door to him, and I got a lot of tapes and LPs and photographs and a lot of the old reel-to-reel tapes of music, which I still have. Basically what I do, and this is quite common in what I'm doing in terms of just a project in Chicago, a lot of people are actually donating music to me because they know I'll just mind it and keep it and protect it and it won't be lost. So whenever I get music like this, I catalogue it, you know. And I was sitting down one evening with the reel-to-reels. They're unmarked. They're just, are you familiar with reel-to-reel tapes? Yeah. So there was a lot of unmarked reel-to-reels. So whenever the children were aware, my wife was out, or the house was quiet, I'd put a reel-to-reel tape on and let it play in the background, and I'd just catalogue what was on it. And it was from Phil's collection that I listened one night, and what was it but a recording of the concert tour in Chicago of the troupe from Ireland. And I thought originally that it was the full concert, but it was the first half before, just to the intermission. But still it was great to have it. So I brought the reel-to-reel tape back to Mr. Bradshaw, who's here, and he worked his magic in terms of cleaning up the music. And I'm delighted to be able to share with you now some of that music. So just imagine, sit back and relax and think you're back in 1969, you know, with long hair and bell-bottom trousers or mini skirts, and you bought a ticket to the concert. This is
freezing Chicago.
oh yeah, November. Maybe not mini skirts, or maybe not mini skirts. So I'll play you some of the music, so you'll get. It's about maybe 10 or 12 minutes each of them, but I'll introduce each of them to you. So this is how they opened the concert. What I said was the Cayley Band. the Cayley Band, that's how they introduce themselves. This is the first of the solos. It's Peadar O'Loughlin on flute, and he plays a slow air, shapeform of Orha, and McKenna's reels. That's Peadar. The next is Sean Ryan. He played 2 jigs solo, if I can find it. I should have said at the beginning, by the way, that even though Kathleen Ryan is not here, Sean's son is here, Brian, and his wife and daughter. So you're very welcome as well. Now we go on to the first song, Eileen. We'll hear how you sounded like in 1969. If I can find my mouse. Oh, here it is. This is a Frances A. Fahy composition, The Queen of Connemara. Frances A. Fahy was a poet and a composer from Kinvara, County Galway. It's a lovely song.
Oh, my boat can swiftly float through the teeth of wind and weather, and I'll sail the fastest hooker between Galway and Kinsale. When the white rim of the ocean and the wild waves rush together, oh, she rides in her pride like a seabird in a gale. Oh, she's neat, oh, she's sweet, she's a beauty in every line. The Queen of Connemara is that founding mark of mine. When she's loaded down with fish till the water leaves her gunwale, not a drop she'll take aboard her that would wash a fly away. From the fleet she speeds out quickly like a greyhound from her kennel, till she lands her silvery store the first on old Kilvara Quay. Oh, she's neat, oh, she's sweet, she's a beauty in every line. The Queen of Connemara is that founding mark of mine. There's a light shines out afar, and it keeps me from dismay. When the clouds are ink above us, and the sea runs white with foam, in a cart in Connemara, there's a wife and wee ones praying to the one who walked the waters once to bring us safely home. She's neat, oh, she's sweet, she's a beauty in every line. The Queen of Connemara is that founding mark of
Beautiful. Beautiful. Next was a solo from Paddy O'Brien, the Bashful Bachelor and McIntyres, two hornpipes, I believe, but I'm having a difficulty in finding this mouse. Famous Paddy O'Brien on the box. Here's a duet. It's a very nice duet actually, with both fiddle, Paddy O'Loughlin and Sean Ryan on fiddle, and they're playing Kelly's and Malloy's. Again, if I can find. Oh, that's not it. Oh. This, have I mixed it up? Let me put this one on and see. I might have mixed someone up there.
sisters, ladies and gentlemen, for my first song this evening,
Thomas Quinlan
I would like
singing.
to sing A Half of the Broken Strings, which was taught to me by my father. It's a very old Irish air, and I think you'll like it. In an Irish cottage by an Irish town sat an old man and a lassie as the sun went down, wrapped in the misty glamour that the twilight brings, gazed on the harp of Erin that had broken strings. Why is that old harp silent? Asked the maiden fair. Why hangs it with the shadows in that corner there? The old man cried, Acushla, little flower of Granuaile, have you never heard the legend of the harp of Inishfail? It's an old Irish harp, little darling, no more with sweet music will thrill the brave hands that played it, the brave hands that made it, a long lying silent and still.
That's Thomas Quinlan. This is, if we have it right, Sean Ryan and Paddy O'Brien, first cousins, playing together on fiddle and box. Here it is.
Paddy had lived in America.
Sean Ryan and Paddy O'Brien, and then they finished with the Cayley Band again. A nice selection of the Fairies and the Toongraney Castle. So that was the concert, or at least a selection from the concert. So I hope you got a flavour for what it was like. Unfortunately, as I say, it was only the first half of the concert I have, but there's a lot more than I played tonight on that first half. But it's wonderful to see it. Now, as I said, they were a full week in Chicago before they ventured off into the other cities. And at that time, in 1969, Eleanor and Jimmy Neary were regarded as the king and queen of Irish music in Chicago, certainly the south side of Chicago, but really in Chicago and practically the whole of America. Jimmy Neary was from Tumiesh, just outside Swinford in County Mayo. He emigrated in 1928, and he was a wonderful fiddle player. There were quite a few in the family emigrated. They were all musicians, and he had a lot of old Mayo music that he brought into Chicago for the first time. And he, first of all, took a very young Johnny McGreevy under his wing. He met Johnny when he was only 14, and Johnny was just starting to play the fiddle, but Jimmy recognised his talent, and he became his mentor and teacher. And in the World's Fair in 1933, Chicago had a World Fair, and there was a band called Pat Roach Harper and Shamrock Orchestra, and the pianist was a very young girl who was born in Chicago. Her mother was from Mayo, called Eleanor Kane, and she was a wonderful piano player. She was very, very unusual in that most piano players, nearly all piano players, when they're playing Irish music, they vamp. You know, they play the beat, so they jump along with the beat. Dum, 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 dum. But Eleanor played the melody on her right hand and the bass on her left hand, which is very unusual. And I have an awful lot of her music, and people who listen to it say, one of them said, it's like she's playing the fiddle on the piano. She's an incredible player. And Jimmy Neary was really taken by her at a very early age. She was only 17 when she was playing at the World's Fair. And she was a friend of Johnny McGreevy, so the two of them became his students. And over time they fell in love and they married. And they had their family in 6123 South Westanaw, Washtenaw in Chicago, and it was regarded as the Mecca. And everyone and anyone who was in the Irish music scene all over America and outside of America, if they ever came to Chicago, it was to this house they came. And these are just examples of the people who over the years have visited and played with the Nearys in that house, going from left to right up the top. That's Andy McGann, based in New York. Paddy Reynolds, based in New York. Up on the top is Kieran McMahona on his mobile recording. He had a radio program, Job of Journey Work, and he had an American Job of Journey Work, and he visited their home on quite a few occasions, recording the music sessions there. The next photograph is that's Jimmy Neary with the fiddle on the right, and a very young Johnny McGreevy on the left. And the guy with the tie standing in the black jacket is Louis Quinn. Louis Quinn was one of the famous fiddle players in New York. He was a great friend and playing companion of Lad O'Byrne. Louis was originally from County Armagh. And down with the glasses is Ed Reevy from Philadelphia, Cavan in Philadelphia. They visited the house very often. This is a photograph of Eleanor actually visiting New York, visiting Paddy Killoran on the right and Paddy Sweeney on the left. This is the famous Joe Doraine, the great box player Joe Doraine. And I was very fortunate to actually interview Joe just before he died, because I heard that he played with Eleanor, and I was trying to figure out how they got together. And Joe only came to Chicago twice in his life. The first time was in 1953, and he was invited to play for the Columban Fathers. The Columban Fathers had a big event every year. They had an annual event as a benefit for their missioners all over the world. And they invited him to top the bill. And Joe came in 53, and played on the big concert was on Saturday, and then there was a matinee on Sunday. And then he said after, he was flying back on Monday, but he said after the matinee on Sunday, he was taken to a house. He didn't know where he was going, but he was taken to a house for a session. And he said, I was walking in the front door and I heard the music on the piano. And he said, the hair stood on the back of my head. And he said, as I'm talking to you now and telling you, the hair is again standing in the back of my head. He said, I couldn't believe what I was hearing with Eleanor playing the music. And he spent the afternoon with her. And he said, it's unfortunate, but he said, someone was recording, but I never got the recording. And a couple of months later, he passed away. And would you believe it, a month after he passed away, I got the recording, which is an awful pity. I'd love to have been able to get from another older gentleman, yeah. And I was going mad that I didn't have the chance to give it to him, you know. But that's Joe Lorraine. Seamus Connolly would be well known to most of you, fiddle player. Seamus used to come into Chicago quite a bit. He was a judge in the Flaccules and things like that, but he always went to her house, to Eleanor, and that's Eleanor playing the piano and Johnny McGreevy. This is down in the basement of Eleanor's house. That's Jimmy in the middle. Eleanor played the fiddle. She was a multi-instrumentalist. She played the fiddle, she played the accordion. Her mother was a very good accordion player, so the first instrument she actually played was the accordion, and then the piano. And this is, on the left is Seamus Cooley, the famous flute player Seamus Cooley, Joe's brother, who spent most of his life in Chicago. Here is Paddy Cronin on the left. Paddy lived most of his life in Boston, but he spent 3 years in Chicago, and he said every part of his living in Chicago was practically in the home of Eleanor and Jimmy. And actually, just before he died, this is Paddy Cronin, I mean, he died a couple of years ago, but Frank Burke was talking to him on the phone, and he said he came back to Killarney. He was in Killarney for quite a few years before he passed away. But he said, when I think back on all my life in America, and he said, it's the one time that I like best is my thoughts of playing with Eleanor and Jimmy Neary, you know. So it was and on the left-hand side here is another photo of Paddy Killorn visiting their house. That's Jimmy on the left. And the younger man on the right is Jimmy's nephew. He's John Neary. He was Jimmy's brother's son, John Neary. John is now 90. And he's not a musician, but he used to he used to travel with Jimmy everywhere. And he recorded most of their sessions, and he recorded an awful lot of music of all of this down through the years. And he has given me a lot of that music, John Neary has. And again, you know, I go through cataloguing what I have in the old reel-to-reels, and sure enough, and it's no surprise that the week that they were there on tour, Paddy O'Loughlin and Paddy O'Brien and Sean Ryan were taken to the home of Eleanor and Jimmy, and they had a session, and sure enough, one of the reel-to-reels was the recording of that session. So I'll be able to play you a few tracks from that session, still in 1969. Here's one they're playing together. The group of them are playing together. And it features Paddy and Eleanor. next one features Peadar O'Loughlin on pipes. I was delighted that Peadar brought his pipes to that session, and if you probably didn't notice it, but on the program for the concert, he does play the pipes in each of the concerts as well, but it's on the second half of the concert, so that's why I wasn't able to get it. But he does play the pipes in Eleanor's house, so I have two tracks where he's featured on the pipes. If I can find this mouse. The mouse must think I'm a cat or something. Playing the pipes with the group. This is a nice hornpipe I thought you'd like. I left that part there because I don't know if you heard him, but that's Johnny McGreevy, and he's saying by golly. And he was known as by golly, but everything was by golly for John McGreevy. And I included one more of the pipes because of where I am. That was the session in Eleanor and Jimmy's house. So after Chicago, the tour went on, obviously, to Cleveland, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, Detroit, Michigan, Providence, Rhode Island, and New York. And by the way, Eileen, just last month I was talking to a man called Al O'Leary. I don't know if you remember him. Al O'Leary, he was born in America, but he was raised in Tipperary in a farm outside Thurles until he was 20, and then he was conscripted into the American Army and was put back into the World War. But he was a great box player. He is a great box player. This month he'll be 93, and he's still playing the box. But he said he put you up in Cleveland, Ohio. So he said to him, you stayed, you and I forget who else, maybe Kathleen, I'm not sure, but some of you stayed in his house. So he said to say hello to you. Al O'Leary, he's a lovely character, a great character. I mean, he's 93, but you wouldn't believe he was 63. The way he carries on, and he plays Apollo soprano, that is one of the biggest I've ever seen. It's a ton weight, and he's 93, and he just straps it on and belts it out. Great character altogether. I've scoured the newspapers, and this is the only photograph I could, and it's a very poor photograph, but this is the only photograph I could get of the actual event in any of the newspapers. This is in the Irish Advocate in New York, December the 6th, so you were home by then, but this was the photograph. And there's Peadar and Sean and Paddy O'Brien and Kathleen playing the piano. And this was part of the report saying that it was in Hunter College Assembly Hall. That was the New York one. It was a tremendous success. Without a doubt, the participating stars outdid themselves with jigs, reels, and traditional songs. So they certainly enjoyed it in New York. So that was the tour. They returned at the end of November from New York, and it was really I believe a historic event. It really led the way for. I mean, Laura Ross obviously saw the potential for such an event, and it was the predecessor. No, not at that time. But then in the 70s, he started tours, and they continue right up to today. But this was obviously the pioneering tour, you know. So it's just wonderful to be able to capture the not alone the history of it, but also the music. Now I'll go back before I finish. They say things happen in three, and in this occasion, it's certainly a third happened, because I'll go back to Phil Durkin, and here I was at home another night, listening to one of his reel-to-reels that I was cataloguing. And it was an accordion player playing on the reel-to-reel tape, and then it ran out, and I turned it over and put it back onto play, and this is what I heard.
This is Sean Ryan speaking here from Laois, Éire. I am making this tape especially for Mr. Frank Thornton, a very good friend of mine, and who is here at present on a holiday which he is well deserving of. It's an appreciation of what he has done for us on our tour, and for all the time we've been over there, and for his wife and family who are so good and kind to us. I know he will be passing on this tape to all his good friends and lovers of Irish music, including Tommy Maguire, my old friend John McGreevy. I hope you're keeping well, John. Joe Shannon, Mrs. Eleanor Keane Neary and her husband, and all the good friends and lovers of music whom I met on our trip over there. I will be looking forward to seeing you all again, please God.
I don't know if you can make it out, but he started off, this is Sean Ryan from Laois, and I'm here with Frank Thornton. Frank was actually over on a holiday, and obviously met up with Sean. And Sean made a private tape of his music to bring back, and he was mentioning the friends Johnny McGreevy, and just to thank them for putting him up in the tour and so on. And he went on to play 9 or 10 tracks of on the fiddle, a lot of them of his own compositions, And then he was joined by Pat Lyons, and Pat Lyons was a local box player who was a very good friend and companion of Sean's, and they played together an awful lot. They made an LP together, the Cliffs of Moher, the LP, and in the second half of the tape, Pat Lyons joins Sean, and they play a duet, play another 8 or 10 tracks, and really nice music. So I'll just play a few just to give you a sample of what was on this tape. Again, I'm trying to find the mouse.
I will start this tape now with compositions of my own. I'll do some of the recent ones I've done lately.
Does that follow?
Starting with 2 jigs.
Familiar voice. Hornpipes.
2 nice little hornpipes now in the key of A. These would be nice for Johnny to work on.
Just include one with Pat Lyons just to let you hear how the two of them play together. They play very well together. So that's them playing as a duet. So that's all the music I have for you, but I just wanted to publicly thank Harry for all the work he put into cleaning up the tapes for me and putting them onto CDs. And when I got them back to Chicago, I made presentation sets of the 3 CDs, and I've given one to Emmett here for the archive here, and I've given one over today to the archive in Merrion Square. So altogether there's just over 60 tracks of really wonderful music. So if you would like to hear all of it or any more of it, they're here to be listened to, you know. And I also have, for the families, I have separate presentation sets that I'll give you as well. So before I finish, I just wanted to acknowledge all of the help I got in putting this presentation together. It was certainly a lot of collaboration between a lot of people, but I'd like to thank them all publicly, and thank you all for listening so intently.
Just want to thank Richie for coming along this evening and sharing all this brilliant research and music, and Eileen for her contributions as well. If anyone's got any comments or questions, you're more than welcome to share them with us now. There's just a microphone there if anyone does want to add anything, just so that people at home will get to hear what's being said.
Just to ask Richard, was it 2 parts or 3 in the concert? Was it 2 parts?
2 parts.
So an hour and a half each part?
Yeah.
People at 7 about.
Oh yeah, they loved it. They went mad for it, you know. Yeah, it was very, very well received everywhere they went, you know. I've spoken to 3 or 4 people who, you might know Tom O'Malley, maybe not Tom O'Malley. No. Tom O'Malley is he's from Mayo. He's probably 85 or 86 now. Lovely accordion player, but he went to all 3 of the concerts and loved every one of them, and he said that people just went bananas for it. He told one very funny story. Thomas Quinlivan, for each of the concerts, was dressed in a tuxedo. Well, the others were pretty well dressed, obviously, but he had a tuxedo with long tails, and they said he used to come out when he came out he accompanied himself to singing that song, you know, and the other songs as well, and he used to flip the tail, and he said the people were just falling around laughing at this. He remembers that clearly, but he went to all 3 of them and said they were just incredible, and great reaction from the audience, you know. The other thing I should say to you is, maybe for another event down the years, but I mentioned earlier that Sean Ryan and Kathleen Ryan, your mom and dad, did a tour. It was sort of a mini tour of America the previous year in 1968 with a very young Paddy O'Brien from Offaly, not the Paddy O'Brien from Nina. Paddy O'Brien from Offaly. He was only 17. He was a great player. He was only 17 or 18 at the time, I think. But they also did a tour, and they spent most of it in Chicago, and that's why they kind of got together to form this tour. But just recently, I've got 2 recordings. One recording is of a concert of that tour in Chicago, and the second recording is going back to Al O'Leary, and that's why he called me. Your dad made a recording in Ireland of a practice session with your mum and dad and young Paddy O'Brien, and it's quite a long tape, and it's really good, and he makes comments during it, and oh Jesus, we better be better, this has to be much better before we go over there, and you know that. But it's a lovely tape of music that he sent to Al O'Leary in Cleveland for Al to kind of use it to promote the event in Cleveland. So I have that tape, and I have the tape of the concert, and I've just given both of them to Harry, so hopefully Harry will be able to do his magic again on that, and someday we could maybe share it again, you know. Anyway, sorry.
Was Ciarán McMahon involved in that recording? The practice that we had. Ciarán?
Oh no, this was a different one. This was the practice one was 68. Yeah.
I think we had a practice for 69.
Oh, did you?
I think Ciarán McMahon was there.
Oh, really?
We had it in
We used to practice in Rossgrave, was it?
Yeah, well, we practiced actually in Bucknan's house in Nina.
Yeah.
My husband.
Oh, your husband? Yeah.
Yes.
Ah, okay.
You know Kathleen who plays the harp. She
Yeah,
was
oh,
there
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Met her last week, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was an aside. Any other questions? Or sure.
I hear from musicians like Christy Moore and Mick Maloney when they went to England in the 1960s to the folk clubs. They were struck by how the audiences would listen to their music, which they weren't used to at all from Ireland. And I wonder, was there anything like that in America? Were the musicians struck by the audience behaviour? Would anybody dance, or was the reception strange for them at all?
Well, there was like everything I heard was very positive in terms of the reaction from the audience. And actually in the 68 recording that I listened to, I didn't listen to all of it yet, but the part I did, in the concert, who was Tom Masterson was the chairman of the IMA at the time, the Irish Musicians Association, in 1968. And he was always, in any of the concerts he gave, he was always a strong promoter and telling people to come out. Instead of sitting down listening, come out and dance. And in this concert, they did the same thing. And they were all dancing, and as they were playing on stage, they were dancing to it in front of the stage. And I don't know how well it was organized to do a dance, but you could hear them all dancing as well. So it was the same in the US. Yeah, they were very. It was amazing, really, how they really kept it alive, and most of it was in the houses, like Jimmy Neary's house. There was an awful lot of house sessions. Phil Durkin's house session up in the north side. There were 2 or 3 that were well known for. So they really kept the music alive, and actually that's what started me on this whole project originally 5 years ago. It was a friend of mine told me. He said, "You know, you're so interested in the history of music, you should go down to Lanigan's." And I never heard of Lanigan's, but Lanigan's is a pub down on the south side of Chicago. And he said that's where all the older guys get together on Sunday night and play. So I went down one Sunday night, and I was expecting, a typical pub session that in the corner of a bar there'd be music. But this was different. When you walk into Lanigan's, there's a long hallway, and you can see the bar at the back of at the end of the hallway. But halfway up the hallway, there's a room to the left. And it was inside in that room that they were having a session. So it was a room just like this, very quiet. And I went in, and there was about 8 or 10 older musicians. The only one I knew was Kevin Henry. I didn't know any of the others. But a few things struck me about that session. It was, first of all, it was the way they played the music. It was very even, slow tempo. It was like, to me, the old days. An awful lot to say, but an awful lot of the music now I think is very, very fast, really fast, But this was slow, and then some of the tunes they were playing were tunes that I hadn't heard for ages, a long, long time ago. And then the third thing was, it was like an old session, as I remember back in Kerry, back in Johnny Franks and that way back in my early days, in that they'd have music and then someone would sing a song, or someone would recite a poem, or someone would just tell a story, and there was no telling people, you do this. It just happens, spontaneously at the end of the music. So it was a real old, and then I realized they were almost caught at a time warp. These people came in the late 40s to mid 50s, and they were playing the same music the same way, telling the same stories, and that's what started me on it. Then I went back to each of them individually and asked them, would they mind if I just interviewed them about their life, and the project just mushroomed from there. You should talk to, and you should talk to, and now it's taken over my life. But that's how it started. Back to your question. So there was a lot of love of Irish music in, you know, in those cities, not just Chicago, but in Detroit and Cleveland and in New York. Very, very responsive, you know. And then that's what, when Colta started in the 70s and went around, all those tours were packed. I mean, the audiences were just mad for it, you know.
That's great. I want to say thanks again to Richie for this evening. We've got 2 events coming up. Our next one is Session with the Pipers on the 6th of August. We'll have Roisin El Safdie singing, Micheál Darby on Fahata on the melodeon, Kieran Mooney on the fiddle and Kieran McPhellamy on the pipes. And then we have Session with the Pipers again, Notes and Narratives again next month on the 15th, and it's Aidan Coffey. We'll be talking about developments in the use of the button accordion in traditional Irish music. So, yeah, thanks for coming along tonight. Thanks again to Richie, and hope to see you all again soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much.